Hello and welcome to Reading Library and this year's film for Heritage Open Days 2022 and its theme of astounding inventions. Now, Reading's not really known as the home to any actual inventions, but over the decades we have had numbers of people who've made their home here in Reading, and businesses and organisations, and they've been pushing the technologies, existing technologies, and creating new ways of doing things and just generally pushing boundaries. So we're going to look at a few of those here today that we have in the Reading Library. But first of all, did you know that Reading, a man from Reading, was actually the first person to ever send a text message? It was in December 1992 and it read "Merry Christmas," and now billions of us send text messages every day. So there's all sorts of things that Reading has to offer with regards to today's theme. So we're going to start off with John Blagrave's Mathematical Jewel. We have had a look at this before in our first film for Heritage Open Days, but I think it's worth looking at again. It's also the earliest book that Reading Library has in its collection, dating from around 1585, and it's regarding an astronomical astrolabe. It's an astronomical instrument that helps measure time of year, latitude and altitude of an object on the horizon, and basically it's an astronomical computer. John Blagrave was born in Reading round about 1560s, and he was known as a mathematician and astronomer, and created a number of astronomical instruments. Tricky to say, but lovely to look at, as you'll see from the book that we have here. He also did a book called The Art of Dialing from around 1609, which looked at sundials, and we have a copy of that here too. So he was born in Reading around about 1560s and died in 1611, and he actually has a monument to his life in St Lawrence's Church, not far from the library here. And his family are known to have held land in Southcote, and I'm sure you're aware that the name crops up in the local area, Blagrave Street for example, a very well known family. So that's our first item. Then we're going to come forward a little bit more in time to William Henry Fox Talbot, and he was a photographer and a pioneer in the subject. And around about 1843 he travelled from his home. He was born in Dorset and died in Wiltshire, but he decided he was going to set up in Reading around about 1843, as I say, along with his assistant, who was called Nicholas Henneman, and they created something called the Reading Establishment, and it was at number 8 Russell Street, which is now 55 Baker Street, and they wanted to become the first commercial studio to mass produce from photographic negatives. So that's what they did. We've got a number of books and photographs relating to the Reading establishment, and the photographs of the Reading area are some of the earliest of architecture in the town that we have today. For example, Eldon Square, St Mary's Church, the Gateway, and a few others. We don't hold the originals here. The original negatives are with the Science Museum, but we do have copies of some of the photographs, which are lovely to see. Next up, we're going to look at Huntley, Bourne and Stevens, and you may think, well, the name sounds a little bit familiar. They are indeed related to the company of Huntley and Palmers, which is having its anniversary this year. Now, Huntley and Bourne and Stevens was founded by the son of Joseph Huntley, the founder of Huntley and Palmers Biscuits. Now, Joseph Jr., he was actually an ironmonger, and he was tasked by his father to create some tins for his biscuits. The idea being it would make the biscuits last longer and also be able to travel, because Joseph Sr. had set up his business at the top of London Street, selling biscuits from his small bakery to travellers passing up and down on the London Road, the A4 today. And he realised that the biscuits would last that little bit longer if they were in tins. So Joseph set up his ironmongery business and created tins for his father. He later went into partnership with James Bourne and Samuel Stevens, and alongside Huntley and Palmers, Huntley, Bourne and Stevens became a thriving business. It was located up on London Street until around about 1969, when they moved to a factory in Woodley. and they stayed there for about the next 30 years, and they were eventually merged into a larger group called the Limpact Group, and they stayed in Woodley, as I say, round about until 1999, when unfortunately due to economic factors that factory had to close, and thus cutting its ties with Reading, its hometown. And again, we've got books and a few photographs, including one from the visit of the then Prince of Wales, who later became Edward VII, when he visited the town in June 1926. So if you're interested in the Huntley, Bourne and Stevens tin designs, you can see a number of them over at Reading Museum, again not far away. They were collected by people up and down the country, and you can actually even find a few tins some distance away from Reading, as Scott of the Antarctic took them on his ill-fated expedition, and there are some left in the hut that he had on Ross Island. The tin designs are amazing, so worth checking out if you can. Now, staying in Woodley, we're going to look at Miles Aircraft, and that was run by a husband and wife team, Frederick George Miles and his wife Maxine, who is known as Blossom. And throughout the 1930s and 40s, they designed numerous aircraft, including the Hawk Trainer, the Magister and the Messenger. They were some of the most aerodynamically advanced for their time. Right, and we've got an example of publicity from Miles Aircraft, and it says that 1933 Miles Hawk was the first modern aircraft to sell for under £400. 1934, first manufacturer to fit split flaps as standard. 1935, came first, second and third in the King's Cup air race. In 1936, they were the first to introduce monoplane training in the RAF. 1937, Miles Kestrel trained the fastest in the world at 296 miles per hour. 1938, Miles Master, that was a type of aircraft, wins the largest contract ever placed for a trainer. 1940, the Miles M20 was the first and only modern fighter to be built in 9 weeks. 1941, Miles M28 was the first aeroplane to carry 4 people at 160 miles per hour and over 20 miles per gallon. 1942, Miles Libellula, most successful unorthodox aeroplane. 1943, we must not say yet, but be assured that these are our laurels, but Miles Aircraft Limited are not satisfied to rest on them. So as well as books and photographs, we have a number of their in-house magazines that they produced, so lovely to actually look at and see the history of the company and how they looked after their workers. Right, finally coming back down to earth, but sticking with transport, we're looking at Buckler cars. These were designed in 1947 by Derek Buckler, and they are a type of space chassis, interconnected tubes, making a lightweight but fast chassis for cars. And Derek had such success with his cars that he had demand from lots of other people who wanted to replicate what he'd done. And he set up business in Caversham Road, I believe number 67, where they've recently unveiled a blue pack to the company. And later on, they were also manufactured out in Crowthorne. But he created a number of cars at the Caversham Road factory, including one which was one in the first in Europe to actually have a fiberglass body. Most of them had previously been given an aluminium body. Buckler cars were sold in 1962, and unfortunately Derek himself died following a bout of ill health in 1964. But the cars themselves still have much of a sort of cult following, and we've got an up-to-date newsletter that's produced regarding the cars, where they are, who's raced them, who's restored them, all that sort of thing, as well as a book and a few photographs on the cars. They've been described as the company that started the British kit car revolution, as it were, and was some of the most advanced of their time. So the 5 companies that we looked at today are just the tip of the iceberg. There are a number of other companies associated with Reading, including Soapers, the gunsmiths. They push forward a lot of gun designs and manufacture. There was Barrett, Exall and Andrews, also known as Reading Ironworks. They created a number of patents, not all of which they put into production. Sometimes they were sold elsewhere, and there's certainly examples of those where other companies have taken their patents and created very successful products. and I'm sure there's many, many more. We've had companies such as Burberry, Frame Clothing, lots of them in Reading who've all taken their industry and just pushed it that little bit further. Now, if you've been interested in anything that's been discussed today, by all means, you're welcome to come into the library, search our catalogue. You'll find lots of our photographs and books and things listed on there. There are a number of local other organisations. We've already mentioned the museum, but another one particularly relating to businesses that's worth checking out is the Berkshire Industrial Archaeology Group, also known as BIAG. There's the Record Office, many more other local associations. So if you have found any of this interesting, do check those out, and thank you very much for watching.